They called me a maid at my brother-in-law's wedding, so I took the mic for 1 minute. Jessica adjusted her simple brown dress one last time before entering the elegant hall in New York City. The wedding of her brother-in-law Brandon would be yet another occasion where her husband's family made her feel invisible, but this time something different stirred in her chest. That's when Amanda, her sister-in-law and the groom's sister, intercepted her right at the entrance of the hall, filled with golden lights and white floral arrangements. "Sorry, but the catering staff must wear the proper uniform," Amanda said loudly, causing several guests to turn their heads. "The service entrance is in the back." Jessica's blood ran cold. Whispers immediately spread among the well-dressed guests watching the scene. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 15 years of similar humiliations, and lifted her chin. "I'm Jessica, Michael's wife. I'm here for my brother-in-law's wedding," she replied firmly but politely. Amanda feigned surprise, covering her mouth with a gloved hand. "Oh, how embarrassing. It's just that with such plain clothes, I thought you were part of the cleaning crew. Well, since you're here, you may come in." Michael appeared beside his wife, but, as usual, only whispered in her ear, "Jessica, just ignore it. You know how my family is." She knew all too well. For 15 years, she had tried to be accepted by the Wilson Millers, a traditional family of real estate entrepreneurs in New York City. From the very first meeting, when they found out she was a door-to-door cosmetics saleswoman, they had treated her as if she were beneath them. The hall was stunning. Crystal chandeliers illuminated tables covered in white linen, and a small stage had been set up for speeches. Jessica observed the elegant guests, doctors, lawyers, other business people, all part of the social circle that had never fully accepted her. "Jessica, dear," the saccharine voice of Mrs. Eleanor, her mother-in-law, cut through her thoughts. "So glad you came. Since you're here, could you help me with a little something?" The family matriarch, a 68-year-old woman with impeccably styled gray hair, held a tray of canapes. "The waitstaff is busy at the bar, and I need someone to serve the main table. You don't mind, do you? After all, someone in the family should be useful." Jessica felt her cheeks burn, but she took the tray. It wasn't the first time her mother-in-law had put her to work at family events. Michael, as always, stayed silent, offering only a weak smile. As she moved between tables serving guests, Jessica caught fragments of conversations. Amanda was telling a group of friends about the family's new real estate venture, a luxury condominium on the west side. Brandon, the groom, laughed loudly as he shared anecdotes about his business dealings. "At least someone in this family knows how to really work," Brandon said as Jessica passed by with her tray. "Not like my brother, who jumps from one project to another." The words hit Jessica like a punch. Michael had indeed tried several ventures over the years, but she never mentioned how she was the one who had actually supported the household. Her husband's family didn't know that. 10 years ago, she had built a thriving sales network that now employed over 50 women across the metropolitan area. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. When it was time for dinner, Jessica looked for her seat at the main table beside her husband. Her name was nowhere to be found. "There was a small mix-up with the seating," explained Brianna, the bride's cousin and event organizer. "We ran out of space at the main table. I set aside a little spot for you over there in the back." Jessica looked at the assigned table near the kitchen, where some salon employees and distant relatives who clearly weren't part of the family's inner circle were seated. "Where's Michael?" "Oh, he's at the main table, of course, he's family," replied Brianna, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Michael waved from the main table, shrugging in a gesture of helplessness. Jessica walked to her designated table, politely greeted the other occupants, and sat in silence. During dinner, she could hear the laughter coming from the main table. Mrs. Eleanor was toasting her children and the family's prosperity. Amanda was talking about a trip she'd take to Las Vegas the following month. Brandon and his fiancée Megan were receiving expensive gifts, jewelry, artwork, even the promise of an apartment. "You know, Mrs. Eleanor said, standing up to make an announcement, "I've decided to give each of my children an apartment as a wedding gift. Brandon and Megan have already picked theirs. Amanda took the one on the Upper East Side. And Michael..." She paused dramatically. Well, Michael already has a hard-working wife. I think they'll manage just fine on their own. Laughter echoed through the room. Jessica felt her stomach twist. Even after 15 years of marriage, all the family gatherings, the birthdays where she was forgotten, the Christmases where she received last-minute gifts, it still cut deep. Just then, the priest overseeing the ceremony called for silence for the speeches. Several family members stood up to speak. Amanda talked about unity and prosperity. One of Megan's uncles shared funny stories about the bride. Brandon thanked everyone for coming and spoke about their future plans. "Would anyone else like to say a few words?" the priest asked, looking around the room. Jessica felt something ignite inside her. 15 years of silence, 15 years of being diminished, 15 years of watching her husband passively accept every humiliation. She rose from the back table and began walking toward the stage. "Jessica, what are you doing?" Michael whispered, but she was already climbing the steps. Amanda tried to intercept her. "I think you should go back to your seat. This isn't the right moment." But Jessica had already taken the microphone. The entire room turned to her, a 42-year-old woman with long, dark brown hair, wearing a simple brown dress that contrasted with the overt elegance of the other guests. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice clear through the sound system. "I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here today celebrating Brandon and Megan's wedding." Mrs. Eleanor shifted in her seat, visibly uncomfortable. Amanda signaled for the DJ to cut the sound, but the young man in charge of the music seemed intrigued by what was happening. 15 years ago, I married Michael and became part of this family, or at least I tried to. The silence in the room was deafening. Megan, the bride, stared at Jessica, sensing something important was unfolding. "All these years, you've seen me as the cosmetics saleswoman who wasn't good enough for the Wilson Millers. The woman who didn't know how to dress properly for your social gatherings, the one who didn't understand business or prosperity." Michael stood up, trying to reach her, but Brandon held him back by the arm. "Let her speak, bro. I think it's time." Jessica took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been preparing for internally for years. "I want to tell you about my work. Yes, I started selling cosmetics door-to-door 17 years ago. I went from house to house, dealt with rude doormen, heard plenty of no's, but you know why? Because my dream was bigger than my circumstances." She paused, observing the attentive faces of the guests. "In the first years of our marriage, while Michael was trying to establish his business, it was my job that paid our household bills. Every product I sold meant food on the table, lights that wouldn't be turned off, car payments made on time." Her voice trembled slightly, but remained firm. "I woke up at 5 in the morning, organized my schedule of visits, prepared the samples, and went out to work. At night, when I got home, I still did the accounting, processed orders, and planned for the next week. Michael always knew this, but you all never cared to learn how our family really functioned." Mrs. Eleanor tried to stand up, but Amanda held her back. "Let her finish, Mom." 8 years ago, I became the regional representative for the cosmetics company. My sales network grew so much that today I employ 52 women. Women like me, who needed an opportunity, who had dreams bigger than their circumstances. Murmurs began to spread through the room. Some guests seemed genuinely surprised. Last year, the national cosmetics company I represented was sold to an international group. Do you know who the main distributor in the state of New York was? Who had the largest sales network in the entire Southeast region? Jessica paused dramatically. It was me. And when the sale happened, I received compensation of $4,200,000 for my 15 years of work and the network I built. The silence was now absolute. Even the sound of the waiters had stopped. But the story doesn't end there. With that money, I started my own cosmetics company. Not just any company, a company that already made $8 million in its first 6 months. I have interested investors from New York City, Los Angeles, and even Chicago. Megan covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes welling up. Brandon stared at his sister-in-law, whom he had never truly known. "And do you know where my company's headquarters is? 15 minutes from here, in a commercial building I bought last year. A building that coincidentally you tried to buy for your new real estate venture. Amanda turned pale. The building on Fifth Avenue that you said was sold to a shell company. It wasn't a shell company. It was my company, Thompson and Associates. Thompson is my maiden name, which I went back to using in business after realizing how tainted the Wilson Miller name was in the market. The words hit the family like a bucket of cold water. Mrs. Eleanor stood up, but her legs seemed weak. Impossible. You're making all this up. Jessica opened her purse and pulled out a folder of documents. Here are the contracts, the company registration, bank statements from the last 6 months, the building purchase papers. Anyone who wants to check can see. She held out the papers, and Brianna, the event organizer, stepped forward curiously. After quickly examining the documents, she nodded to the others. It's all here. It's true. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. But why did you never tell us any of this? Brandon asked, rising from the main table. Because for 15 years I tried to be accepted as I was, the cosmetic saleswoman, the simple woman who loved your son and wanted to be part of this family. But you never gave me that chance. Jessica looked directly at Mrs. Eleanor. You always made it clear that I wasn't good enough for Michael, that he had married below the family's social standing, that I was a burden, an embarrassment. Jessica, Mrs. Eleanor tried to speak, but her daughter-in-law continued. Do you remember Christmas 3 years ago? When you gave jewelry to Amanda and Megan, and gave me a set of embroidered dish towels because, in your words, I needed practical things for the kitchen. The memory made several people in the room shift uncomfortably. Or when you took that trip to Aspen and said there was no room in the car for me, but you took Amanda's maid to look after the kids. Michael lowered his head, clearly ashamed. Or when you threw that birthday party for Mrs. Eleanor and asked me to arrive early to help in the kitchen while all the other daughters-in-law came as guests. Every word from Jessica was like a stone thrown into a lake, creating waves of embarrassment that spread throughout the room. But what hurt me the most wasn't these humiliations. It was realizing that Michael, the man I loved, never had the courage to stand up for me. Never. She looked directly at her husband. 15 years, Michael. 15 years of you whispering in my ear to ignore it, to not care, to pretend it wasn't happening. 15 years of you choosing the comfort of not confronting your family over protecting your wife. Michael stood up, tears streaming down his face. Jessica, forgive me. I've always been a coward. I was afraid of losing my family. And me? Wasn't I your family? The question echoed through the room. Megan began to cry silently, moved by the pain evident in Jessica's voice. But do you know the most ironic part of this whole story? Jessica continued, a small smile appearing on her lips. You're holding this beautiful wedding at the Skyline Manor, aren't you? Brandon nodded. One of the most elegant and expensive venues in New York City. Amanda spent months searching for a place available on this date. Amanda stood up, confusion on her face. Where are you going with this? I'm getting to the fact that the Skyline Manor was sold 6 months ago. The previous owner was struggling financially and decided to sell the business. Jessica paused, watching the bewildered expressions around the room. The new owner preferred to keep the original management to avoid disrupting operations. That's why you didn't even notice the change when you booked the venue. Amanda's heart began to race. Jessica, you're not saying that. I'm saying exactly that. I'm the new owner of the Skyline Manor. You rented my venue to hold the wedding. The impact of the revelation was like a bomb. Mrs. Eleanor had to steady herself on her chair. Amanda covered her face with her hands. Brandon looked around as if seeing the place for the first time. Impossible, murmured Mrs. Eleanor. The documents are right here, Jessica said, holding up the folder. I bought it through the company, using my maiden name. That's why you didn't know. Megan got up from the main table and walked to the stage. Can I see the documents? Jessica stepped down and handed the folder to the bride. Megan carefully examined each paper, her hands trembling slightly. It's all here, she said, turning to the guests. The deed, The transfer documents, everything. Jessica really owns this place. The room erupted in murmurs. Guests turned to each other, trying to process the information. Some looked impressed, others embarrassed for having participated in past humiliations. "Why did you do this?" asked Brandon. "Why buy the place knowing we'd hold the wedding here?" "I didn't buy it because of the wedding. I bought it because it's an excellent investment. The Skyline Manor has high demand and an impressive profit margin. It was purely a business decision." Jessica returned to the microphone. "But when I found out the wedding would be here, I'll admit I felt a certain poetic irony in the situation." She looked around the room, observing every attentive face. "For 15 years, you made me feel like I didn't belong in the elegant spaces of the Wilson Miller family. That places like this weren't for people like me. And now, you're celebrating the family's most important wedding in my venue." The symbolic weight of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. Amanda stepped closer to the stage, her eyes brimming with tears. "Jessica, I don't know what to say. We treated you horribly." "You did. But do you know what saddens me the most? It wasn't how you treated me. It was realizing you never cared to really know me." Jessica stepped down from the stage and walked between the tables, speaking directly to the guests. "In 15 years, how many times did anyone in this family ask me about my work, about my dreams, about my story?" She stopped in front of the main table. "Did you know I lost my mother when I was 17? That it's why I had to start working so young? That every product I sold was a way to honor her memory, the woman who always told me never to accept less than I deserved?" Mrs. Eleanor lowered her gaze, visibly moved. "Did you know I always wanted children, but had 3 miscarriages in the first years of my marriage? And that throwing myself into work was how I survived that pain?" Michael reached for his wife, but she gently pulled away. "Did you know the first woman I hired for my sales network was being beaten by her husband and needed financial independence to leave? That today she's a regional manager with her own home." Megan began to sob harder. "Did you know half the women who work with me are single mothers who found in selling cosmetics a way to support their children with dignity?" Jessica returned to the center of the room. "No, you didn't know any of that. Because for 15 years, the only thing you saw when you looked at me was the cosmetics saleswoman, the woman who wasn't good enough for the Wilson Miller family." Brandon stood and started walking toward her. "Jessica, I need to apologize. We all do. We were prejudiced, arrogant, cruel." "You were. But do you know what's saddest? I truly wanted to be part of this family. I wanted you to accept me. I wanted Michael to be proud of me." She looked at her husband. "But I realized I can't force anyone to respect me. Respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you earn by being who you truly are." Jessica returned to the microphone for her final announcement. "And who I truly am is a woman who built an empire from nothing, a woman who turned every humiliation into fuel to rise higher, a woman who proved a person's worth isn't in the name they carry, but in the character they build." Applause started timidly from guests outside the family. Gradually, it grew louder. "That's why I have a few announcements. First, as a wedding gift to Brandon and Megan, I'm forgiving all debts the Wilson Miller family owed to this venue's previous owner, debts I assumed when I bought it." Amanda's eyes widened. "The office debts? The loan for the West Side condo?" "All of it. $220,000 forgiven as a wedding gift." The room erupted in applause. Mrs. Eleanor stood, walking slowly to Jessica. "My dear, I have no words for my shame. Mrs. Eleanor, I don't hold grudges, but I also won't let myself be diminished anymore." The mother-in-law nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Second announcement," Jessica continued. "I'm creating the Thompson Institute for Women Entrepreneurs, a project that will offer free training, microloans, and mentorship for women who want to start their own businesses." Megan stepped onto the stage and took the microphone from Jessica's hands. "Can I say something?" Jessica nodded. "Jessica, my name is Megan, and today was supposed to be just about my wedding, but I think this moment is far more important than that. Jessica, I want to ask for your forgiveness for all the times I stayed silent, for all the times I saw you being humiliated and said nothing." The bride turned to the guests, "And I want to tell every woman here today, if you've ever felt small, underestimated, or invisible, you've just witnessed the most powerful example of how to overcome it." She handed the microphone back to Jessica. "The first event for the Thompson Institute will be next month, right here at the Skyline Manor. Every woman here is invited free of charge, especially those who've ever felt the way I've felt all these years." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. Michael finally managed to reach his wife. He stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. "I need to speak," he said, his voice choked. "Jessica, in front of everyone here, I want to ask for your forgiveness, not just for what happened today, but for 15 years of cowardice." He turned to the family. "You humiliated the most extraordinary woman I know, and I, who should have been the first to defend her, was the first to fail her." Michael knelt on the stage. "Jessica, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if you give me a second chance, I promise I'll never disappoint you again. I'll never choose silence when I should choose you." The entire room was completely silent. Jessica looked at her kneeling husband, then at the family that finally seemed to see her for who she truly was. "Michael, get up." He obeyed, his eyes red from tears. "I love you. I always have. But love without respect isn't enough. Love without the courage to stand up for me isn't enough." She paused. "But I believe people can change. I believe you can learn to be the husband I've always needed you to be." Michael hugged her, and this time she didn't pull away. "But I have conditions," she said, still in his arms. "First condition, you'll never let anyone disrespect me in your presence again, no matter who it is. I promise. Second condition, you'll go to therapy with me, because we have a lot to talk about after these 15 years. I promise. Third condition, you'll support my business the same way I've always supported yours, because now we're truly partners. I promise." Jessica turned to Amanda, who had approached the stage. "Amanda, do you have something to say?" Her sister-in-law stepped onto the stage, visibly emotional. "Jessica, I have to confess something. All these years I was jealous of you." The revelation surprised everyone. Jealous of me. Jealous of your strength, your determination, the way you kept trying, even when we treated you badly. I always wished I had half your courage." Amanda took a deep breath. "I was born rich, I never had to fight for anything. My father handed me the company, the apartment. Everything was given to me. And when I looked at you, I saw a woman building something with her own hands. That bothered me because it made me realize I'd never built anything on my own." "Amanda, that's why I belittled you. Because by putting you down, I tried to feel better about myself. But today I understood that what I felt wasn't superiority. It was pure envy." The two women embraced, ending 15 years of tension and resentment. "I'd like to propose a partnership," said Amanda. "How about if the family's next real estate venture was focused on affordable housing? Homes for the women from your institute who managed to establish their businesses." Jessica smiled for the first time all evening. "Now you're speaking my language." Mrs. Eleanor approached the stage, asking to speak. "Jessica, I'm a 68-year-old woman. I spent my whole life thinking I knew what was best for my family, believing I could judge people by their appearance, their profession, their background." The family matriarch wiped her tears. "Today, you taught me the greatest lesson of my life. You showed me I wasted 15 years without knowing an extraordinary daughter, because that's what you are, my daughter. And I hope you'll let me be the mother you always deserve to have." "Mrs. Eleanor, I always wanted you to like me. I always did, my dear. I was just afraid you were better than us, and today I learned that you truly are." The embrace between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law marked the end of an era of misunderstanding and the beginning of a new family dynamic. Brandon took the microphone to give the final speech of the night. "Everyone, this was supposed to be my wedding, the most important day of my life. But today I learned that the most important days are the ones when you discover who the people you love really are." He looked at Jessica. Sister-in-law, for 15 years I thought you were just my brother's wife. Today I found out you're one of the most remarkable women I've ever met, and I'm proud to be part of your family. Megan joined her husband on stage. Jessica, I want you to be the godmother of the Thompson Institute. I want to learn from you how to use my privileges to help other women. It would be an honor, Jessica replied. The rest of the night unfolded completely differently from how it had begun. Jessica, who arrived being mistaken for staff, ended the evening dancing on the main floor, surrounded by a family that finally saw her for who she truly was. Guests approached her constantly, asking for business cards, eager to learn more about her company and the institute she was building. Some women even volunteered for the project. You know what's funniest? Jessica said to Michael during a slow dance. What? For 15 years I thought I needed to change to be accepted by your family. Today I realized all I needed was to be myself, just more boldly. Michael spun his wife to the rhythm of the music. And I realized I've been married to the most extraordinary woman in the world for 15 years and never had the courage to shout it for everyone to hear. Well, now you have plenty of chances to make up for lost time. At the main table, Mrs. Eleanor chatted animatedly with other guests about the institute. Amanda jotted notes on a napkin, brainstorming ideas for the real estate partnership. Brandon and Megan danced happily but were clearly moved by the lesson they'd witnessed. As the party neared its end, Jessica stepped onto the stage one last time for a final thank you. I want to thank all of you who stayed until now. I know tonight wasn't what you expected when you came to a wedding. She smiled at the guests. But sometimes life gives us unique moments. Moments where we can choose who we want to be from then on. Today, I chose to stop accepting being diminished. Brandon and Megan chose to use this moment to become better people. Michael chose to find the courage to stand up for me. Amanda chose honesty over pride. Mrs. Eleanor chose love over prejudice. Jessica paused, looking around the hall she now knew was hers. And all of you here today can also make a choice. You can choose to walk out and forget everything you've seen. Or you can choose to take this lesson into your own lives. You can choose to see people for who they truly are, not for how they appear. The applause was long and sincere. The Thompson Institute will open next Saturday at 9 in the morning, right here. For those who want to be part of something bigger than themselves, we'll be waiting. Thank you for your attention, and may Brandon and Megan be very happy. When Jessica stepped off the stage for the last time that evening, she was met by a line of people eager to greet her. Women asking for details about the institute, men apologizing for laughing at the cruel jokes made over the years, guests expressing admiration for how she had handled the situation. Jessica, said a woman around 70 years old, my name is Martha. I've been a family friend for many years. I want you to know I've always admired your dignity, even when others didn't see your worth. Thank you, Martha. My granddaughter is starting a craft business. Can I bring her to the institute? Of course. It's exactly for young women like her that we're creating this project. After over an hour of receiving well wishes and saying goodbye to guests, Jessica finally found herself alone with Michael in the nearly empty hall. What now? He asked. Now we go home. Tomorrow we start a new life. Do you really forgive me? Michael, I've loved you for 15 years. I'm not going to stop now. But love doesn't mean accepting any behavior. It means helping the person you love become the best version of themselves. They walked hand in hand toward the exit. On the way, Jessica took one last photo of the empty hall, decorated with white flowers and golden lights. Why are you taking a picture? Because today was the day I discovered who I really am. And I want to always remember this moment. At the hall's exit, they found Amanda waiting. Jessica, can I talk to you for a minute? Michael stepped away discreetly, giving the two space to talk. I want to invite you. Next weekend, I'm hosting a lunch at my house, just the women in the family. You, me, Megan, my mother. I want us to talk about how we can support your institute. And I want you to teach me a few things about entrepreneurship. It would be my pleasure. And Jessica. And thank you for not giving up on us. A lesser person would have cut ties with this family long ago. Amanda, Family is something you build every day. Sometimes you have to tear down a few walls to build stronger bridges. The two hugged once more before saying goodbye. In the car on the way home, Michael drove in silence while Jessica gazed out the window at the lights of New York City. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how funny life is. 15 years ago, when I married you, I thought I needed to win your family's love to be happy. And today? Today, I realized the most important thing is earning my own respect. The rest follows." Michael stopped at a red light and looked at his wife. "I love you more today than the day we married. Why? Because today I finally saw you for who you really are, and you're far more extraordinary than I ever imagined." When they got home, Jessica went straight to the office she'd set up in the guest room. She turned on the computer and began responding to emails that had come in during the evening. 3 journalists wanting interviews about the Institute, 5 businesswomen interested in partnerships, 2 universities offering space for lectures. Michael appeared at the door with 2 cups of tea. "It's been a long night, don't you want to rest?" "I do, but first I need to organize a few things. The Institute is opening in a week, and there's still so much work to do." He sat in the chair beside the desk. "Can I help?" "You can. I need someone to handle the legal side. Contracts, documentation, that sort of thing. It would be an honor to work with you." Jessica smiled and took her husband's hand. "Michael, I want you to know something. Everything that happened today wasn't about humiliating your family or getting revenge. It was about finding my voice after 15 years of silence. I know, and I deeply admire your courage. Promise me that from now on we'll be true partners. In everything? I promise, and I promise you'll never have to fight alone for respect again." They worked together late into the night, planning the first steps of the Thompson Institute. On Jessica's schedule for the following week, interviews with journalists, meetings with potential investors, organizing the opening event, and lunch with the women of the family. A week later, the Skyline Manor was packed once again, this time for the opening of the Thompson Institute. Over 200 women attended the event. Business owners, students, homemakers, saleswomen, women of all ages and backgrounds. Mrs. Eleanor arrived early to help with the setup. Amanda brought a group of friends interested in investing in the project. Megan cut the ribbon alongside Jessica. Michael handled all the legal aspects of the event. "Exactly 1 week ago," Jessica said into the microphone, "I stood on this same stage to talk about 15 years of humiliation and silence. Today I stand here to speak about hope and possibilities." The room erupted in applause. The Thompson Institute isn't just about teaching women to run businesses, it's about teaching women to never accept being diminished. It's about showing that our worth doesn't depend on anyone's approval. It depends only on our willingness to work, grow, and help other women do the same. By the end of the event, 15 women had signed up for the first training program. 3 investors offered funding for future projects. A university proposed a partnership for research on women's entrepreneurship. At the end of the day, when the last guest had left, Jessica sat alone on the stage, looking at the empty hall. "Satisfied?" Michael asked, walking up to her. "Fulfilled," she replied. "A week ago, I didn't know I had the courage to do all this. You always did. You were just waiting for the right moment to show it." Jessica stood and walked through the hall, touching the tables where soon other women would sit to learn, grow, and empower themselves. "You know the best part of all this?" "What?" "Now I know I can be who I truly am, without asking anyone's permission." Michael hugged her from behind. "And who are you truly? A woman who turned every no into fuel to grow, a woman who will never accept being invisible again, a woman who learned that respect isn't begged for, it's earned." They left the hall hand in hand, leaving behind the space that had been the setting for both their greatest humiliation and their greatest victory. 6 months later, the Thompson Institute had already trained over 300 women. 52 of them had started their own businesses. Jessica's story became the subject of national magazine features and university lectures. The Wilson Miller family was completely transformed. Mrs. Eleanor became one of the Institute's biggest supporters, using her network to secure investors. Amanda created a special real estate credit line for graduates of the program. Brandon and Megan spent their honeymoon visiting similar projects in other countries to bring ideas to the Institute. And Michael finally found his calling working alongside his wife, handling the legal and administrative aspects of the Institute's projects. But more importantly, he found the courage to stand up for her in any situation. On the night of the Institute's 6-month anniversary, Jessica was at home preparing a presentation for international investors when Michael arrived with a bouquet of flowers. "What's this for?" "To celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "The fact that exactly 6 months and 1 week ago I got married again." Jessica looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" 6 months and 1 week ago at the Skyline Manor, I met my real wife for the first time, and I fell madly in love with her, all over again." Jessica smiled and accepted the flowers. "And this woman? Is she interesting?" "She's the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Brave, determined, generous, and most importantly, she'll never let anyone diminish her again." "Sounds like quite the woman." "She is. And the best part is, she taught me something very important." "What's that?" "That it doesn't matter where you were born, the last name you carry, or how much money you have in the bank. What matters is having the courage to be who you truly are and never ever accepting less than you deserve." They kissed right there in the kitchen of the modest home they'd always lived in, which now felt like a palace because it was finally filled with the mutual respect that should have always been there. The end of the story. Now tell me, dear listener, what did you think of Jessica's story? Have you ever been in a similar situation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.